Hey there, how's it going? My name is Lurkst and welcome to My Experience With, a show where I talk about some of my favorite games and my experiences playing them. Today we'll be taking a look at Mortal Kombat 2, the second installment in a series that throughout its 30-year conquest has etched its bloody name in the halls of video game history with its trademark skull-burning, soul-stealing, and spine-ripping brilliance.
Mortal Kombat has spawned a long line of sequels and spin-offs, some really good and some we'd rather not talk about.
Lucky for us, today we're taking a look at one of the best. Before we begin, I'd like to give a quick shout out to DarylSung06. His candid playthroughs inspired me to make a video of my own. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description.
Released in 1993, Mortal Kombat 2 introduced some of the series' most iconic elements, adding in 7 new playable combatants, each with their own story and special movesets, 2 new bosses, the Shokan Beast Kintaro and Emperor of Outworld Shao Kahn, plus a whole bunch of secrets, all set in a grim landscape with an unearthly soundtrack to match. Returning from the first game were Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, and Raiden, as well as Shang Tsung and Reptile making their debut as playable characters. Joining the fray were Kitana, Princess of Outworld, and her twin sister Mileena, the Tarkatan General Baraka, Major Jax Briggs, and the Shaolin warrior Kung Lao. Sonya and Kano, however, remained absent from the MK2 roster due to a combination of statistics from the infamous EJB menu and hardware limitations. Midway, Mortal Kombat's original publisher would often screen cabinets of the original Mortal Kombat to check on how the games were functioning as well as observing gameplay data. Statistics seen across arcades at the time showed Sonya and Kano were the least picked fighters. There was also not enough storage to have them be fully playable alongside the 7 characters joining the roster, though they are still present in the Khan's Arena stage as prisoners taken by Outworld.
Speaking of Outworld, it cannot be stated how much I love the look of this game. Seriously!
The environments have a very distinct feel that I haven't found in any other Mortal Kombat game that I've played. There's a strong sense of dread, but in the best way possible. Stages like the Living Forest and Acid Pool are among some of the more memorable locations from the series as a whole. The Wasteland in particular sticks out to me as a dark countryside riddled with impaled bodies and fragments of what was possibly once a functioning city. The haunting purple tone gives the impression that the sun is blacked out, snuffing out any and all hope to ever see light. Though, that's just one example. Every stage in this game feels like you're fighting inside of a cursed painting.
Compared to its predecessor, Mortal Kombat 2 had better character models, superb voice acting, and cranked the violence up to 11 with fatalities and special moves that still leave an impression all these years later.
Fatalities and friendship finishers were also introduced in this game as an alternative to the hyper-violent, blood-spewing fatalities that had become synonymous with the series. Instead of slicing your opponent in half, you could turn them into a baby, or present them with a nice little something. It's a great way to humiliate your opponent, or maybe just something you would want to do whenever mom walked by so she wouldn't take the game away.
I feel I should also bring up that a big part of the Mortal Kombat mystique back in the day was the many Easter eggs and rumors lying in its coded depths.
On rare occasions, the beginning of a round would be interrupted by a hidden character that could only be fought under certain conditions. They present a brief, ambiguous message before suddenly disappearing, leaving you amazed at the encounter yet confused as to what exactly you're supposed to do to engage them in battle. Alone is how you will find me. One day we will fight? Toasty? These short confrontations were a breeding ground for rumors and misinformation. You'd hear kids on the school bus talking about characters named Hornbuckle, Emerald, and Red Robin. What the fuck? Does he bust out the bottomless fries for his friendship?
Video game magazines would even print doctored screenshots with insane laundry lists of how to encounter these non-existent combatants.
It was always something like, have your opponent stand in the middle of the stage, finish with a double flawless at the 13th second with one arm tied behind your back, having your TV upside down, and beating the game blindfolded. This was at the dawn of the internet, so word of mouth and these pictures were the best reference a lot of people had to go off of. Now, I'm too young to have been there for the initial Mortal Kombat rumor mill, but I did experience something similar with Pokemon when I was in elementary school. I remember my friend George telling me you could re-battle Kyogre in Pokemon Sapphire by running along the side of this building in Rusterbo City. It sounds really stupid, but I actually tried it for a good while. Part of me knew it wasn't true, but what did my first grader mind know? I wanted it to be real so bad, I kept trying for hours. I imagine this was the case for many kids doing any and all things to fight the fabled fighters they had heard about. In reality, there were only ever 3 hidden characters that could be fought in Mortal Kombat 2. Jade, a green palette swap of Kitana, can be fought by defeating the opponent before the question mark block using only low kicks. Smoke, a gray palette swapped reptile who is crazy fast and uses Scorpion's moveset. To fight him, you have to be in the portal stage, perform an uppercut that summons a cutout of Dan Forden, hit down and start right as he exclaims, Finally, there's Noob Saibot, a blacked out Sub-Zero palette swap who also has access to Scorpion's spear. To encounter this midnight-hued warrior, you'd have to take on the grueling task of winning 50 versus matches in a row. Or just input a code on the home console version. There is one more thing I should mention. This game is hard. Mortal Kombat 2 is notorious for its cheap AI. Even on home consoles, the input reading is hair-pulling to say the least. It's like playing rock, paper, scissors with your friend. You can see he's about to throw a rock, so you pick paper, and a split second after you finish your throw, he sticks his 2 fingers out and calls scissors. That doesn't sound very fair, does it? Well, that's just how Mortal Kombat 2 operates to keep you pumping quarters into the machine. Most, if not all, arcade games were created with profit in mind, and you better believe MK2 was no exception. According to ClassicArcadeGaming.com, Mortal Kombat 2 is the 8th highest grossing arcade game of all time, making over $600 million from its release in 1993 up until 2002. Still, I don't understand why they couldn't tone down the difficulty for the home releases. This shit is ridiculous.
Is that your best?
The hardest version I've played so far, without a doubt, is on Mortal Kombat The Arcade Collection, released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2011. Good lord, is this brutal. Every attack you deal feels like a baby tap, while the AI is 3 moves ahead. I'm not exaggerating when I say the fight against Kintaro took me well over an hour. Even with Kitana's fan lift and throw, it was extremely tedious.
But that's enough of an introduction for such a legendary game from a beloved franchise. I want to go ahead and share some of my personal experiences with Mortal Kombat 2, why it means so much to me, and why it's my favorite fighting game of all time. As a kid into my teens, I would spend summers at my grandparents' house in the more rural area of South Texas, a place where internet and cable TV were unheard of.
Mornings and afternoons were filled with PBS Kids reruns, shows like Between the Lions, Arthur, and Dragon Tales. It was 2006 outside, but inside it was still very much the 90s. On Saturdays, our grandparents would take my brothers and I into town to eat something and afterwards head to the flea market, a magical place filled with hidden treasure and a lot of crap. It is there that at 6 years old I first laid my eyes on a gray box sitting on a vendor's table. Super Nintendo.
By this point, I had a Nintendo GameCube and had played the Nintendo 64 at my cousin's house, but I had never seen a Super Nintendo before.
After some persuasion, by that I mean crying and begging, my grandfather purchased it for us. Alright, we got a Super Nintendo. My brother and I then got to pick a game each, so I chose Super Mario All-Stars, while my brother chose Mortal Kombat 2. I remember the atmosphere really creeping me out. Everything felt so dreadful and desolate, a sharp contrast to the 16-bit Super Mario Bros. 3 we had been playing alongside it. The characters' screams of pain and brutal deaths were pretty shocking as a 6-year-old, but that in no way deterred me from playing. I was hypnotized. A lifelong Mortal Kombat fan had just been made out of me. By the time I was 11, I had gotten to the point where I could get to Kintaro in only 2 continues. I had no idea at the time about the 30 lives or skipping to a certain fight with the code, so I'd only have 2 tries to finish the game before I would game over, and of course, Kintaro would stomp them into nothing.
I remember in the golden age of YouTube when unregistered hypercam was still a thing, watching people play the game like they had been training their entire lives.
Handling the notoriously difficult and cheap AI with such fluid motion that in my 11-year-old mind, the only reasoning I could find behind it was that their game was modified or mine just hated me. Have you ever played a game that made you feel like that? I have. Sonic Heroes is a close second. Fuck that game.
Eventually, there came a day where I moved on to other games.
I had a GameCube and had received a PS2 for Christmas a year or two after getting my Super Nintendo. I played Sonic Adventure DX and Mortal Kombat Deception to death, but Mortal Kombat 2 sat in the cartridge slot of my Super Nintendo, mocking me.
Cut to the year 2019. I'd been out of high school for a little more than a year at this point and had been living with my brother on our own, with the passion for collecting games burning like an eternal flame.
I was doing the usual browsing Instagram when I saw that a company named Arcade1Up would be releasing an at-home arcade cabinet with the first 2 Mortal Kombat games and UMK3. Needless to say, I was beyond stoked. An actual arcade cabinet with 2 sets of controls, all at a fair price. Since I was a kid, I always wanted to have my very own Mortal Kombat 2 machine. But because of the time period I had grown up in, arcades were scarce, limited to pizza parlors and movie theaters. I'd never seen one in public, much less had the funds to come close to purchasing one. It was a dream come true. I remember shortly after its release, my older brother phoned me up, boasting that he had bought the last one at our local Walmart. My reaction was initially a passive-aggressive, "How about that?" But I raced over to help put it together so that we could relive the memories of summers at our grandparents' house. When it was up and running, one of my first thoughts was, "This thing is a little short, no?" However, I quickly brushed it aside and we moved the machine close to the end of a bed and began playing.
Up until this point, I had never seen an arcade-perfect version of MK2.
I was so used to my Super Nintendo and the PlayStation 3 port that it was genuinely mind-blowing to see the game running with little to no concessions. A couple months later, I got a call from my older brother telling me that he needed to free up space in his home, and if I wanted the arcade machine, it was mine. I jumped at the chance and began my journey to beat the game that had stuck with me since childhood.
Well done.
My god, did that feel good. Beating Mortal Kombat 2 is up there with getting a call from work telling you that you don't have to come in. A break today, but an uphill climb that will inevitably continue.
To this day, I enjoy learning about Mortal Kombat 2 and its ports, watching corruptions of and comparing the home console versions, checking out others' casual playthroughs while doing some of my own.
And collecting any media related to it, like this Game Players magazine from 1994 that has a first look at the home ports that had yet to come out. How cool is that?
I'd like to close by saying that Mortal Kombat 2 has left an impression on me that select games ever get to. I really owe it to those formative years of having my hands around a Super Nintendo controller, which in turn gave me a greater appreciation for retro games as a whole. But we'll get into that another time. Feel free to leave a comment sharing your memories of Mortal Kombat 2 and what the game means to you, or even your earliest video game memories. I'd like to thank you for watching. Until next time, my name is Lurkst. Take care now.